Hey guys, and welcome to a showdown of the Vikings as Ilmatar leads the forces of Norsca up against Robane and his dwarvish folk. Both these factions are, or at least have elements of them, which are based off those old Norse warriors, so it should certainly be a good, fun game. We've got some pretty interesting units which you don't get to see terribly often either, particularly from the Norscan side of things, and that is a bucket ton of Marauder Hunters. These guys, I used to be a big fan of them back in the day before switching over to Javelins, but Marauder Hunters throw axes. They have a shorter range, a worse firing arc as well, but my god, do they pack a huge punch with some pretty insane AP. Certainly going to be very good up against the Dwarves if they can get those shots away, not pushed back by Flamethrowers, Miners, Thunderers, and all that good stuff. Apart from that, the main battle line shall be made up with Marauders with great weapons, cheap, cheerful, and ready for a good fat scrap. Excellent at armor piercing and getting through that thick Grombrindle armor that the Dwarvish folk are known to bring. We have a couple of chariots as well. Chariots in general have been very meta against Dowry folk for a long time, so we do have 2 units of them, plus a Shaman Sorcerer Fire on Chariot and a Marauder Chieftain. Just going for the basic guy here. No Wulfric the Wanderer, no siree. Shaman Sorcerer is going to be coming in with a Scroll of Power, but also a single spell, Flamestorm. Very good at getting rid of Slayers when they bunch up around your chariots. On the flanks, we have Norscan Ice Wolves, looks like one on either side, and up in the skies, we have 2 Manticores. Manticores are going to be dropping down, trying to assassinate key targets, characters, as well as being pretty useful at harassing the enemy gun line. For the Dwarves, they've gone for the risky pick up in the sky of a Gyro Bomber. Gyro Bomber going to be very powerful here if your opponent hasn't brought Manticores. It's going to have to be really reluctant to push forward and kind of hide out with its friends until those Manticores are dealt with. We have Miners of Blast and Chargers in the front line, backed up by the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass and triple Flamethrower with the Scolder Guard, as well as 2 units of basic Iron Drakes looking to bring the fire and pain to the forces of Norsca. And considering Norsca have low armor, I think these guys can certainly do a decent job. We have Dwarf Warriors guarding the flanks, as well as some Thunderers in that central pocket, backed up by a couple of units of Slayers, and the mighty Thorgrim Grudgebearer himself, bringing all his good buffs and goodies. And I'm particularly a big fan of the Oath of Vengeance. Minus 24 melee defense is certainly some nasty stuff. So without further ado, let's get this battle underway. You can see the Ice Wolves already stalking their way through the trees, salivating at the jaws, getting ready to hop onto any enemy squishy back line troops. Hunters are taking massive burst damage now from the Thunderers, who of course do have better range than these guys. Looks like the first Flamestorm is going to go down, attacking the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, which is quite ironic because these guys do fire damage. Flamestorm is going to roll back into the Iron Drakes, but they have really good fire resistance, and it looks like the Flamestorm isn't going to be doing too much. Hunters are now starting to unleash their axes upon the enemy, raining them down from the skies. Miners of Blast Chargers taking pretty considerable damage. It looks like they actually outrange the Miners a little bit, who are pushing forward now as the chariots come tearing forward, pushing into that front line. Oh my god, these Miners not having a good time whatsoever. Their health already down to halfway, but now some blasting charges have connected with the Hunters. Thunderers continue to lace them with bullets from afar. They are going to have to force back a little bit for the protection of the great weapons, who are now starting to drive towards the enemy front line as the Shaman Sorcerer and the Marauder Chieftain instantly go after these Thunderers in the back. That's going to allow those Hunters to get a little bit closer. However, Slayers are nearby. They certainly can pop onto these guys and try to slow down and shut them down, with more Iron Drakes hiding in the woods, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Gyro Bomber is doing its best. It's holding the Manticores in place and allowing the Thunderers to get some really lovely crossfire in, although it seems that not too much damage went down. Perhaps, but yeah, one unit is kind of firing at each one. They should be going for a bit of a focus fire, in my opinion. Iron Drakes and Scolder Guard continue to rain fire down on the enemy, but these chariots are causing all kinds of problems for the Dowry forces. Slayers as well are being dragged wide, chasing off some Ice Wolves. Needs to be hopping on these chariots and dragging them down, as that Gyro Bomber is terrified up in the skies. I cannot blame him. Thorgrim Grudgebearer, though, is sorting out a personal beef with this Manticore. Oath of Vengeance has been popped on it, lowering its melee defense, and it is getting slaughtered. That is one book, or one grudge taken out of the book. Manticore being driven away. Thunderers are being overwhelmed at the moment, but Dwarf Warriors are rallying to the cause as the Iron Drakes try to free themselves from the pressure of the Norscan Ice Wolves. Another Flamestorm does go down, and it looks like the Chieftain and Sorcerer got themselves in a bit of hot bother as the Slayers surrounded them and started to slaughter them, but a well-placed Flamestorm there is really annihilating them. It can even do some glorious friendly fire onto these Marauders of great weapons. Oh, that is the gift and the curse of Vortex spells, but certainly worth it to get those Slayers off the field. Thunderers are just getting munched on. We have chariots in here, we have Marauders with great weapons, we have Wolves and it looks like the heart of this flank of the Dwarvish people has been broken and they're running for their lives, and this Marauder force certainly has a ton of mobility. Scotland Guard up to 52 kills, continuously firing in now to the Marauders with great weapons. If you have a little look at their damage value, over 1,000, certainly not too shabby. The Slayers have rallied around Thorgrim Grudgebearer, who once again is dismantling another Feral Manticore. Looks like he has a hankering for some Manticore flesh for supper, and that Feral Manticore down to minus 26 leadership is just getting slaughtered by those Dwarvish heroes of old. Shaman Sorcerer considers charging in before decides, you know what, it's actually not really worth it going in there. And Marauder Hunters looking to shut down the Scolder Guard, and some of them have even been moved into combat. And that's one of the good things about this type of unit. Relatively solid melee attack. 36, certainly not too shabby. 20 melee defense isn't too terrible either for a ranged unit. They're going to be able to get in here and muck up the Scolder Guard, stop them from shooting, whilst the other thrown axes continue to pile in shots on top of them. Thorgrim is kind of the centrepiece left for the Dwarvish folk, rallying around the Slayers, doing some good damage to Hunters, forcing back great weapons, but it's certainly looking a little bit shaky. Up in the trees, we have some Thunderers desperately trying to loose shot after shot, and some rallying Miners throwing in blasting charges, setting the fire aflame. But it is looking very rough. More Thunderers are going to be able to push off these Norscan Ice Wolves. Looks like they are going to break with some Dwarf Warriors, forming a desperate shield wall to protect them. And in the central force, Thorgrim is now dueling that Marauder Chieftain, and I think the Norscan player is underestimating the power of Thorgrim, who will easily dismantle a Marauder Chieftain. Fight or die means nothing to him, but he is terrified. That is hilarious that Thorgrim can actually be terrified. I didn't know that. As the Feral Manticore manages to force him off, and the Marauder Chieftain shall have the last laugh. Really fun game by these two champs. Always good to see some units we don't see terribly often in the meta coming in the form of these thrown axes, who across the board got some okay damage value. Certainly nothing too amazing, but on one or two units they did relatively well. And I think against Dwarfs, they certainly can be a big pain in the butt. And one problem that Robane really had is he shot them down really well early on. But by shutting them down, he then let the Chariots and the Manticores into his back line because he couldn't focus fire them down. He was so desperately trying to focus down at the thrown axes instead. Well played to these two champs. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll go through the damage value and damage dealt in just a second. But if you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe as well for more Total War Warhammer action. And there are links down below to my Discord, as well as Patreon, where you can support my channel. Also send in replays via Discord and all that good stuff. Feel free to comment as well. What was your favourite moment of the battle? What was your highlighted unit and your MVP? For me, I particularly love Thorgrim slaughtering those Manticores, doing some really lovely damage to them, and beating them to a bloody pulp, and finding out that axes do indeed beat Flamethrowers. Maybe not damage value-wise, we'll get to that now. So, for Ilmatar, I like the cheap and cheer from Marauder Chieftain, only 771 damage value, but managed to shut down the range troops, which was basically the Norscan win condition here. Likewise, the Shaman Sorcerer, 920 damage value. Getting off one of those units of Slayers is always quite nice. Marauders across the board with great weapons, 1,000 damage value here, not too shabby. And again, big kills across the board, managing to cleave their way through the relatively cheap front line of the Dwarvish forces. From the front axis, some of them got 644 damage value, but the others really struggled. Good utility unit all round though, managing to go into combat and get relatively close to their damage value back. Marauder Chariots, 577, 424, not too shabby, but they did fulfill their goals, and that's kind of the main crux of this Norscan build. No one really got insane damage value across the board, but they all worked as a nice synergy to beat back the Dwarvish forces. As for the Dwarfs themselves, I love seeing Thorgrim Grudgebearer, 747 damage value, though certainly isn't paying for himself, he's very expensive. Likewise, the Miners really struggled, getting dragged out of position and having to push forward through Chariots to try and shut down the enemy range. Dwarf Warriors equally did not fare too well. Slayers did okay though, 1,306 damage value on this unit is very impressive, 722 on the other, despite the fact they did take a Flamestorm to the face. And the Eindrakes really struggled, man. I mean, the Scolder Guard got good value, 1,230 is some really nice stuff. Both Thunderers doing okay, but the other Eindrakes really not paying for themselves. And likewise, the poor Gyro Bomber does bring a sad kind of feeling to my dowie heart. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Until next time, peace, peace. And as always, stay awesome.